"You're being laughed out of the room, Graham," Laura muttered under her breath as she adjusted the small earpiece. "You know that, right?" Graham Kincaid didn't answer. He was already walking down the marbled corridor toward the chamber doors, jaw tight, eyes locked ahead. The guards outside, two towering insectoid soldiers with silver-plated armor, tilted their heads at him with something between amusement and disdain. He'd stopped trying to read their expressions weeks ago. The doors opened with a mechanical sigh, and the chamber's sound hit him like a wall. Not angry voices, not debate. Laughter. Dozens of alien delegates were gathered around a projection at the center of the floor, where ancient human broadcasts played like circus reels. A 1930s baseball announcer's voice boomed out. "And it's a strike." The crowd goes wild, followed by a burst of static and tinny cheers. Alien representatives slapped tables, chittered, and barked laughter in their own tongues. Another clip rolled, a news report from World War II, then a burst of pop music from the 80s. Each one drew another wave of ridicule. Kincaid walked to his seat, not rushing, not slowing, just steady. The laughter swelled louder when they noticed him. From the opposite row, Terran Voss, the Karith delegate, a thin-limbed reptilian with polished scales, leaned forward with an exaggerated smile. "Ah, Ambassador Kincaid joins us. Perhaps he will explain this." Home run, his people seemed so thrilled about. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Laura's voice ticked in Kincaid's ear. "They've been at this for an hour. Council leadership hasn't stopped them." He pressed the earpiece subtly, muting her. If she kept talking, he'd lose his calm. Kincaid sat, back straight, hands folded on the table. He didn't flinch when another delegate called out, "Do all your wars begin with music? Or is that how you distract yourselves from the death tolls?" The projection cut to a grainy black and white image of soldiers on D-Day. The laughter turned sharper, crueler, until even the presiding council chair allowed a small chuckle. Kincaid felt the muscle in his jaw twitch. He remembered his father's voice, telling him that losing his temper meant losing the room. He kept his breathing measured. When the laughter subsided enough to hear words, he spoke. Not loud, not defiant. Controlled. "My world never asked to join this chamber. You found us. You studied us. You laughed at us." His voice stayed calm, but the steel in it carried. "You've had your fun with our music, our wars, our chaos. But there's one thing your recordings didn't show." He let the silence stretch, deliberately. A few delegates leaned in. "They didn't show that we're still here. After every war, every famine, every disaster, we stood up again. You mock the noise of our past. What you don't understand is that the noise never stopped us. It carried us forward." For the first time that day, no one laughed. Terran Voss narrowed his eyes, tilting his head. "You speak bravely for a species that cannot even reach beyond its star without borrowed engines." Kincaid looked him dead in the eye. "Borrowed, for now." That earned a few hushed murmurs. He saw Commander Rilvek, the Jorth military delegate, watching him closely. Unlike the others, Rilvek wasn't smiling. The council chair rapped a claw on the table. "Enough posturing. Earth has no vote here. Humanity is under observation, not partnership. You will remain as such until your species proves itself, or burns out in its own noise." More laughter scattered across the chamber, but thinner now, edged with unease. Kincaid stood, refusing to sit through another round. He pressed the earpiece back on. "Laura, call the shuttle. We're done here." "You sure?" she asked. "Yes. They won't take us seriously until we give them a reason to." As he turned for the doors, a voice called across the chamber. It was Commander Rilvek, his tone colder than the rest. "Ambassador Kincaid. If you keep building in secret, if you keep preparing for war, the Dominion will know. And when we come, you will not have time to finish whatever toys you are working on." Kincaid paused at the threshold. He didn't look back, just answered with a low voice that carried enough to be heard. "Then you'd better hope you come before we're ready." The chamber fell into a hush. And for the first time, Graham Kincaid saw something new flicker in their alien eyes. Not laughter. Not contempt. Something sharper, something they hadn't expected to feel yet. A trace of fear. The conference room smelled faintly of ozone from the recycled air systems, but no one noticed. Voices clashed over one another, sharp and bitter, bouncing off the polished steel walls of the United Coalition Assembly. We can't fight them, Graham. Look at their fleets, their technology. One mistake and Earth becomes rubble, shouted Governor Lin from the Pacific Bloc, her palms slapping the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. Across from her, Colonel David Mercer leaned forward, scarred hands pressed flat against the surface. They're already probing our defenses. Jupiter's outposts reported unidentified ships last week. You think those were friendly tours? They're sizing us up. His voice was gravelly, measured, but it carried the weight of someone who had spent his whole life preparing for wars that were never supposed to happen. Dr. Laura Keating tapped a datapad, and a projection flared above the table. Grainy recordings of strange silhouettes against the void, sleek alien ships that had appeared and vanished without a trace. She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut through the shouting. They're not laughing anymore. They're testing us. And if we sit here bickering, we'll hand them proof that humans can't organize long enough to survive. Governor Lin's face twisted. And your solution is what? Build toys with stolen parts? Invite war before it even comes? Kincaid had been silent until now, listening, cataloging. He pushed his chair back slowly and stood, adjusting the cuffs of his suit as if calming himself with the smallest gestures. Governor Lin, no one here wants war. But wanting peace isn't enough. We saw that today in the council chamber. They don't respect words. They respect power. If we don't prepare, we'll never even have the chance to negotiate. He let the silence stretch, catching eyes around the table. He could see the split forming, half of them pale with fear, the other half simmering with defiance. Mercer broke the quiet with a dry chuckle. And if they come knocking while we're still building? Then we bleed for time. We bleed so the next wave has a fighting chance. Laura turned to him, eyes flashing. Not bleed. Strike back. They underestimate us, which means we can make them choke on their own arrogance. I have a design that, she caught herself, shaking her head. It's not ready yet. Say it, Kincaid ordered quietly. Her jaw tightened. A gravitational disruptor. Crude, dangerous, but effective. It could tear apart their ship formations. If we can stabilize it. The room erupted again, half in horror, half in excitement. Governor Lin threw up her hands. Weapons of annihilation? You'll make them come faster. Mercer leaned back in his chair, smirking without humor. Or make them think twice. Kincaid raised a hand, silencing the chaos. Enough. This isn't a debate about morality. This is survival. We'll prepare in secret. Civilian fronts, research cloaked in energy projects. If they're watching, they'll see a divided, noisy world. They won't see what we're really building. The assembly broke into whispers and muttering, no consensus reached, only a widening gulf between those who feared the aliens and those who feared humanity's own potential. Later, in the dimly lit shuttle back to his quarters, Kincaid finally allowed himself to breathe. Laura sat across from him, datapad balanced on her knees, her face pale from exhaustion. Mercer, arms folded, stared out at the void as if daring something to appear. They're going to find out, Laura said quietly. No matter how well we hide it. They always do. Then we'll make sure when they do, Kincaid replied, his voice low. It's too late to stop us. Before Laura could answer, Mercer's wrist calm crackled. Static at first, then a panicked voice from one of the listening stations on the Martian belt. We intercepted chatter. Council Security Division drafting a proposal. Containment measures. I repeat, they are talking about containment, human expansion flagged as destabilizing risk. The transmission cut abruptly. Laura's head snapped toward Kincaid. Containment? That's not diplomacy. That's a green light for force. Kincaid didn't respond right away. He stared at the faint curve of Earth in the distance, a blue sphere framed by blackness. His throat tightened with something between rage and grim certainty. They laugh today, he said at last, but next time, they'll bring guns. Mercer's voice rumbled from the shadows of the cabin. Then it settled. We don't wait. We build. We fight. And we make sure when they fire the first shot, We fire the last. The shuttle fell silent except for the hum of its engines. In that silence, Kincaid realized there was no going back. Humanity has intercepted alien chatter about containment. The divide within Earth's politics has deepened. Kincaid, Mercer, and Laura commit to clandestine war preparations, knowing the aliens may strike first. The alarms didn't blare. They never did when the ships weren't supposed to exist. Out past Jupiter's shadow, a mining station drifted in silence. 600 workers, families among them, carried out their routines with no warning that the void around them was about to shift. The first report reached Earth through a scrambled relay. Unidentified vessels, repeating, unknown class. We are broadcasting peaceful intent. Then static, followed by a deep, warbling hum. The signal cut and never returned. In the underground command center beneath Geneva, Kincaid listened to the silence where voices had been. His fists pressed into the table until the knuckles whitened. Across from him, Mercer stood stone still, his jaw clenched hard enough to ache. Laura typed furiously on a console, trying to confirm what they already knew. They said it wouldn't happen, she whispered, her voice cracking with the effort of keeping steady. Dren swore to me in private that there would be no military action. None. Kincaid's eyes burned. Dren may not have lied. The council is fractured. This could be a faction acting on its own. Mercer snapped his gaze toward him. Does it matter who gave the order? Our people are dead. And they'll keep killing until we hit back. No one argued. An emergency meeting was called within the hour. The coalition leaders gathered, some pale and frantic, others burning with anger. The divide of weeks ago had widened into a chasm. They struck an installation with families on board, shouted a delegate from the Atlantic Union, his voice shaking. This is an act of war, no matter what they call it. Governor Lin's reply was sharp and panicked. You want to declare war on civilizations that could erase us in a day? Are you insane? Mercer's voice cut through like gravel sliding down steel. No, Governor. What's insane is letting them butcher us one outpost at a time. Laura threw the latest projection onto the central display. Images from reconnaissance drones flickered across the screen. The alien ships were sleek, angular, their energy signatures screaming of Jorth Dominion tech. They're not denying involvement, she said coldly. They don't need to. All they need is for us to hesitate while they probe further. Arguments rose, voices colliding like thunder. Kincaid watched them, every muscle tight, then finally slammed his hand flat against the table. The noise stopped. You think we have a choice? We don't. This isn't about choosing peace or war. The choice has already been made for us. Whether we prepare to survive or we prepare to vanish. The room fell into silence that felt heavier than shouting. Weeks later, Earth's hidden factories bled smoke into the night skies under false names. Civilian energy projects disguised new power cores. Research vessels carried weapon prototypes under sealed containers. Out on the asteroid belt, Mercer drilled a hand-picked unit in conditions harsher than boot camp. He didn't smile once. The first test came sooner than anyone wanted. A Dominion vessel entered Saturn's orbit, claiming a navigation error. Kincaid authorized Mercer's squadron to intercept, despite furious objections from half the coalition. Laura's voice shook only once as she transmitted the activation sequence for her untested railgun array hidden on an asteroid. If this fails, they'll know exactly how weak we are. Mercer's squad opened fire. The railguns tore through the void with streaks of light, punching holes into alien plating. The Dominion ship reeled, energy flickering. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the impossible happened. The vessel spun, flames erupting in silent bursts, and collapsed in on itself. Earth had crippled its first alien warship. But the victory wasn't clean. Half of Mercer's squad never returned. Wreckage and bodies drifted into the black, silent memorials against Saturn's rings. When the footage reached the council chamber, the laughter was gone. Delegates leaned forward, tense, faces tight with disbelief. Some sneered in fury. Others whispered. Kincaid stood again, just as he had weeks before, his voice even, his gaze unflinching. You wanted to see what the noise of humanity becomes when you push it too far. Now you have. The chamber didn't laugh this time. And somewhere among the rows of alien faces, he saw the first crack in their unity. Not amusement. Not scorn. Something far more dangerous. Recognition. The broadcast went out on every channel Earth could reach, stitched from wreckage footage, bloodied soldiers, and Kincaid's words. No spin, no filters. Just the truth laid bare. Humanity had taken a shot meant to erase them, and they had hit back. Across the planet, the reaction was electric. In crowded city streets, people cheered at the images of Dominion metal burning against Saturn's rings. In quiet kitchens, families watched in silence, clutching each other with a mix of pride and fear. And in the assembly halls of the United Coalition, politicians who had begged for restraint now found themselves cornered by their own citizens demanding strength. But inside the war rooms, the cost was more than numbers. Colonel Mercer paced the hangar where bodies were still being unloaded. The smell of burnt composites and charred fabric clung to everything. His soldiers stood silent in neat rows, waiting to be carried home in metal coffins draped with the flags of nations that had never agreed on anything until now. Laura approached him, her shoulders hunched under fatigue. She held a datapad, but her voice was raw, stripped of professional distance. David, I didn't design those railguns to be a memorial. I thought, if we showed we could fight back, maybe it would scare them off. Instead, Mercer turned slowly, his face etched with lines deeper than his years. Instead, it proved we can bleed and still keep fighting. That's what scares them more than the guns. She shook her head, gripping the datapad tighter. It's also what's scaring us. The council convened in emergency session, the chamber vibrating with fury and unease. Terran Voss hissed at the gathered delegates, his voice echoing across the vaulted hall. They've crossed a line. They have no right to field weapons of this scale. If they are not crushed now, they will infect every star with their chaos. Elaradren, the mediator, spoke firmly, though her hands trembled at the edge of her robes. And if we crush them, what message does that send to every smaller world watching this chamber? That the council exterminates those who dare to survive. Her words drew murmurs, a few nods from minor delegates who had always sat silent before. For the first time, there was no unified laughter. There was only division, lines of fracture spreading through the council like cracks in glass. From his seat, Commander Rilvek observed quietly, his eyes never leaving Kincaid. When the human's representative rose to speak, the chamber hushed, waiting for the usual ridicule. Kincaid's voice was level, but the weight behind it pressed on the air. You thought we would crawl. You thought you could mock us into silence. Instead, you lit a fire. That fire won't stop because you don't like the shape of it. If you want us to remain quiet, you'll have to put us in the ground. And I promise you, we won't make that easy. Silence followed. No laughter. No jeering. Just the realization that the galaxy's balance had shifted. Back on Earth, preparations accelerated. Smaller alien factions, disillusioned with council arrogance, began sending quiet feelers toward humanity. Weapons shipments disguised as trade goods slipped into the belt. Engineers who had never trusted the council passed along fragments of schematics. Laura locked herself in a secure lab with a team of scientists, pushing the gravitational disruptor toward completion. Her hands shook when she tested the models, knowing what it could do if unleashed. But every day the reports came in, alien ships prowling closer, probes being destroyed, colonies vanishing into silence, and she silenced her doubts a little more. Mercer drilled new recruits, men and women too young for the weight on their shoulders, their eyes lit with equal parts fear and pride. He pushed them harder than he had ever pushed anyone, because he knew the next battle wouldn't end with one crippled ship. Kincaid spent his nights studying the web of alliances forming in the shadows. The galaxy had been stable for centuries, a balance of old powers and old grudges. Humanity had shattered that balance without meaning to, and now he had to decide whether to build a new order or be crushed under the old one. The first open clash came over Earth itself. A Dominion fleet entered orbit, bold enough to broadcast their arrival. The sky lit with fire as Mercer's units scrambled and Laura's railguns thundered again, this time joined by swarms of crude stealth drones armed with warheads that had no business flying, but did anyway. For hours, the planet shook with combat. Cities lost power, satellites fell burning, and still the human lines held. When the last Dominion cruiser broke apart in a streak of flame, Earth had bled badly, but Earth was still standing. Around the world, people who had once cowered now lifted their eyes to the stars, no longer as subjects of mockery, but as citizens of a species that had forced the galaxy to take notice. And far away, in the council chamber, Elora leaned toward Kincaid, her voice barely more than a whisper. "They aren't laughing anymore," she said, fear threading her words. "They're terrified." The council chamber was no longer a place of order. Delegates shouted over each other, robes flaring as factions broke apart in plain view. Terran Voss stood at the center of the storm, his claws slamming against the podium as his voice rumbled through the hall. "They have slain our fleets. They dare to stand in open defiance, to spill Dominion blood in front of every watching world. If we allow this, the council itself will unravel. The time for debate is finished. Humanity must be erased before their spark ignites others." But the usual chorus of agreement was fractured. A delegate from the Solarii, thin and luminous, stood trembling but resolute. "And if we erase them, then what of us when the Dominion turns its hunger toward our skies? Humanity has shown that the Dominion can bleed. If they fall, the rest of us will be next." The chamber rippled with dissent. Some rose to Voss's side, others leaned toward the Solarii. Never in living memory had the council cracked so openly, and the cracks were widening. Kincaid sat still, hands folded, his eyes locked not on Voss but on Elora. She sat rigid in her chair, her face pale under the hall's harsh lights. When she finally looked at him, it was with the knowledge that the words they spoke next would decide if the galaxy burned. On Earth, celebration mixed with grief. The Dominion fleet had been driven back, but at a terrible cost. Entire cities had been plunged into darkness. Thousands of civilians were dead, their homes shattered in orbital strikes that missed their marks by only seconds. In the makeshift hospitals that lined collapsed streets, Laura walked among the wounded. Children cried out for parents who would never come. Soldiers she had armed with crude prototypes now lay with bandages soaked red. Every face carved guilt deeper into her. She paused over a young woman missing both legs, her face pale but her eyes burning. The girl grabbed Laura's hand with surprising strength. "You gave us a chance," she whispered. "Don't stop. Don't let them scare you into stopping." Laura tried to answer, but her throat closed. She simply nodded, her eyes wet, and forced herself to move on. Back at the command bunkers, Mercer reviewed casualty reports until the words blurred into nonsense. His officers argued about resource shortages, defense grids, new recruits, but his mind was fixed on the faces of soldiers zipped into bags. He had buried men and women before, but never on this scale. When Kincaid entered the room, Mercer didn't stand. He simply looked up, his voice flat. "If you keep feeding them speeches like the last one, they'll follow you into hell. But speeches don't patch holes in our lines. We're running out of everything, and the next strike will come harder." Kincaid leaned on the table, lowering his voice so only Mercer could hear. "We're not supposed to win this by numbers. We win it by making them afraid of us." "And how exactly do you plan on doing that?" Mercer asked bitterly. Kincaid's eyes flicked toward the sealed datapad Laura had left in the corner. "By finishing what she started." In orbit, wreckage from the last battle drifted like a graveyard. Salvage crews picked through it, gathering Dominion scrap to study. Hidden in the twisted metal, they found something unexpected: encrypted Dominion orders. When decrypted, the message was simple but devastating. The Dominion was not retreating. They were gathering. A fleet 3 times the size of the one that had attacked Earth was assembling in silence, poised to strike not only the human homeworld but any allies that dared support them. When Kincaid read the transmission, he said nothing for a long time. He simply handed it to Elora, who had risked everything to be present on Earth. Her voice shook as she whispered, "If they launch this, the Council itself won't survive the aftershocks. Half the galaxy will rise against the Dominion, the other half will side with them. Civil war, at a scale no one can contain." Kincaid finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Then we don't wait for them to strike." That night, In the deep labs beneath the Andes, Laura powered the gravitational disruptor for the first time. The chamber hummed with an unnatural vibration, the very air bending around the device as though reality itself were struggling to hold steady. She stared at the monitor, her reflection warped across its surface. The power readings climbed higher, dangerously unstable, but within those numbers was a weapon that could do what no railgun or drone ever could. A weapon that could pull a Dominion fleet apart without firing a single shot. Her hands hovered over the controls, trembling. She could feel the choice pressing down on her, the line between survival and annihilation, between becoming prey or becoming something worse than the predators. From behind her, Kincaid's voice cut through the hum of the machine. Once we use it, there's no going back. Laura turned, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Do we have a choice? Neither of them answered. Because outside, in the darkness of space, the Dominion fleet was already on the move.